let's talk NFL draft. Ladies and gentlemen, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. It is our guy, Rob Staton. Hi, Rob. Sorry about that. Got started getting on a tangent there, and I couldn't shut up. My apologies. Rob is with us. We're going to talk. We'll put the finishing touches on the NFL season. We'll look ahead to the NFL draft. Rob's got his thoughts on Klint Kubiak, also Geno Smith. The game of mentioning Geno Smith in public again. We'll get into all of that. Rob's weekly appearance brought to you by the fabulous people at Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926, committed to delivering the highest quality products and services to the greater Puget Sound area. Get a free quote today, suplinen.com, or give them a call, 253-383-2636. Again, read all of Rob's work at SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Video content up on YouTube, Rob Staton Football. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Staton. All right. Did you check out? Did you watch the Klint Kubiak press conference?
Yes, I did. I listened to it on the way home from work yesterday, and I've listened to a couple of other interviews he's done since.
Yeah. And did you fall asleep?
No, I mean, I said yesterday, I think he reminds me a lot of Kyle Shanahan. You know, his voice is very, very similar.
Yeah.
I think it's a different kind of boring, though, because with Shane Waldron, I kind of felt like there were, the lights were on, but nobody was home. And with Klint Kubiak, I don't get that sense. It more feels as if, do you know what? He's not an electric, charismatic Sean McVay, but I do think that he said a lot in a few words and has great clarity on what he's going to try and do. So I was quite happy with what he had said.
And here's the deal too. We were making fun of it earlier. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's no one cares whether or not he's good in front of the camera. It's like, can he actually coach football? Like, Washington State hired a new football coach, Jimmy Rogers. He ain't going to win any press conference, battles with anyone. I think of John Harbaugh with the Ravens. He's, Belichick, none of these. So it doesn't really matter. And I like what he said. And I mean, he said kind of all the right things, probably what everyone wanted to hear. Hey, we're going to be physical. We'll run the football. We're going to use a fullback. Not going to use Byron Murphy. He praised Geno, praised DK. So I think there was certainly a lot to like for what he said yesterday.
Yeah, I think it was interesting as well, the kind of information that he shared with regards to the scheme. So in a separate interview, he mentioned that the zone blocking scheme requires an elite center. And that was probably the most interesting thing I think he said, because the Seahawks clearly don't have an elite center. And if this is going to work, they're going to have to invest in a center. And there has been quite a few pods that I've listened to and I've seen sort of stuff written suggesting, well, maybe they'll just roll with Oluwole or Timmy, which, it's not an improbable scenario. But when you hear the new offensive coordinator say this requires an elite safety an elite center to work, I've just got a feeling they're going to try and upgrade there. So I would imagine that 2 years ago they signed Draymond Jones, first day of free agency. Last year they made a big splash to keep Leonard Williams. I've got a feeling that the first day or the second day of free agency, Puck, we're going to see the Seahawks have signed one of the two big free agent centers,
and who are they?
Drew Dolman, who is at Atlanta, 26 years old, perfect zone blocker, graded in the top 5 for centers for PFF, 6th best zone blocking offensive lineman in the league, great age, perfect signing. If you can't get him, you pivot to Ryan Kelly, and they are the two guys.
Kelly, what happened to Kelly? I mean, Colts, but did he get injured? Was he dealing with some injuries?
He's had some injuries. He didn't have the best season last season. He had a much better season the year before in terms of zone blocking. But the Colts drafted a guy called Tanner Bortolini. I think it was round 4 a year ago, and they were kind of preparing for life after Ryan Kelly, knowing his contract was expiring. So I think he's going to be available. He's 32 in May, so he's towards the back end of his career. He definitely won't be a long-term option like Drew Dolman could be. But if you need a really good center, you need to go and get someone who's been there, who's done it, who can call the protections. Ryan Kelly can do that. So I think you go for Dolman. If you can't get him, you go and get Ryan Kelly.
Hey, I love it, man. I love it. I'm with you. We've talked about this many, many times. I mean, we love building, I think, from the inside out when it comes to a football team. So you go and get one of the two highly rated centers on the free agent market in. It reminded me on this one on just thinking of Olu with Timmy here for a second. Was he strictly a center in college? Did he play
Yes.
any? He never played guard, right?
He was a center, and then he transferred to Michigan at the end of his career, and he was basically a very solid center, unspectacular.
Just wondering if he could switch over, if he could play guard at all. Just another option, just in case if it's available to them. Obviously, you need a backup center there as well. But I'm just wondering if you could transition him to the guard position.
He's a good backup center.
Yeah, sure.
But he's not an elite center. That's what Klint Kubiak says he wants. So I think they're going to go after it. And I think they will. And that will set up the rest of the offseason. Then you can go and look at what options there are at guard in the free agent market. Yeah. You will have the draft. There's a lot of options in the draft, not just in the first round. So I think it would set everything up for the kind of offseason they need.
Feels like a lot of depth with the line when it comes to the NFL draft.
Yeah, there is, and I've been looking at this. So everybody's projecting like the Seahawks to go with an offensive lineman in the first round, understandably. But if they were to make a couple of interesting signings on the offensive line, and there are some things they can do at guard as well as center, but I think the center is the one that you get out of the way first, then, like we've talked about, it could be Tyler Booker, it could be Armand Membo, it could be Kelvin Banks Jr., in the first round. But if it's not, there are some perfectly good, I've been writing about this today, zone blocking offensive linemen who are available. There's a couple of Iowa guys. I don't know about you, Puck, but I'm always down for drafting an offensive lineman or a tight end from Iowa because they just seem to work.
100%.
So you've got a couple of guys there, Jennings, Dunker, and Connor Colby, who are just perfect zone blockers, who are tough, gritty. The kind of players that I think the Seahawks have not drafted enough of over the years. Their offensive linemen have tended to be more upside types, bigger bodied. I think these guys are just, they're gritty. They get in there, they do a job. In Iowa last year, they had this incredible run where they ran for over 200 yards 8 times in 2024. And I want offensive linemen who can do that. And then you've got other players, Gray Zabel, who everybody talked about after the Senior Bowl, Jack Nelson at Wisconsin. You've got the 2 Georgia guards. So that you can get options in round 2, round 3, round 4. And quite frankly, I would be down for multiple picks on the offensive line, irrespective of whether you actually sign linemen. Get some depth, get some competition. Yeah. Let's make this a priority.
Yeah, because the identity, and I think we kind of touched on that. You've touched on that on the website as well. Is they've got it. It's one thing to talk about their identity, but they've got to have their identity, right? They've got to go out and acquire their identity. Can't just keep talking about it. Go out and do something about it. Words are one thing, but they need action when it comes to their identity.
Well, we just see the same thing every year. Whether it was Pete Carroll, Mike McDonald, John Schneider has been the consistent. This talk of being a team that nobody wants to play. And I love all that stuff. Every time Mike McDonald says, we want to be a team that everybody hates to go and travel and face at Lumen Field. And then you watch the team play, and they are a finesse team. And they don't look tough and physical and ugly to play against. And I think now is the time. Let's see some action. So what does that look like? It does mean the kind of moves we're talking about on the offensive line. It does mean getting some grit and some toughness up front with these, Iowa linemen, Wisconsin linemen that I'm talking about here. But it also means, and Klint Kubiak mentioned this, go and get a fullback. If you want to play this brand of football, go and sign a fullback. There's a guy in Baltimore who's a free agent, Patrick Ricard, perfect for them. Go and add him as a fullback. If you want to play this brand of football, you need an absolute monster of a blocking tight end. There's a guy called Jackson Hawes at Georgia Tech. He's going to be a later round pick. If you need someone to catch passes, you've still got Noah Fant under contract. You've got AJ Barno, had a good rookie season as a pass catcher. Go and get Jackson Hawes in and just say, right, when it's short yardage in the red zone where we struggled last year, you're going out there, you're going to hit someone in the face. And if you want to play that brand of football, you have to actually make the moves to do it. So that's what I want to see. We're a couple of weeks away from the combine. We're then going to see free agency. We're then going to have the draft. I want this to be a statement of who the Seahawks say they want to be. Finally delivered about 8 years after they said they were going to do it.
Yeah, and then, it's because remember, you got the famous quote or the famous line from John Schneider saying, about interior linemen. They get overdrafted, they get overpaid. But that's exactly what's been that's been their Achilles heel for a decade.
It has. I think that's quite an interesting comment to revisit today, I think, because when I was watching that Super Bowl and you're watching the Eagles defensive line really having its way with Trey Smith. And you're thinking, this is a player who might get 23, 25 million a year if he's lucky in free agency. And I didn't feel like you were getting 23, 25 million dollars worth of play in that Super Bowl. He can't do it on his own. They had to move Joe Tooney to left tackle, but the Eagles dominated that line. So I think that kind of a comment is in reference to that. And I know that most Seahawks fans, and I'm not against it either. If they sign Trey Smith, I'm not going to come on here with you, Puck, and start complaining that they invested in the offensive line. But it does speak to kind of what I think John Schneider's talking about. That's fine. You can still spend a bit of money on it, though. You can get a center. I think if you go and get Drew Dorman, it might cost you $15 million a year. That'd be more than Seattle has spent on any center ever. He'd be the second highest paid center behind Creed Humphreys, which feels a bit about fair for where he is. But you've got to go and do something like that. And then you have got to be prepared to draft offensive linemen. Can I tell you one thing, though, that I think is perhaps encouraging? So Christian Haynes did not have the rookie season that we were all hoping for. But I went and had a look at his zone blocking grade when he was at UConn as a rookie, and it's an 89 grade. So he was a very good zone blocker. So I just wonder whether this could be the best thing for him. I've kind of written him off. I think a lot of people have written him off after what happened. I just wonder if year 2 for Christian Haynes, he could get a second chance and he could land a starting spot at right guard.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to write. Yeah, it's always hard to write anybody off after a year. And I think offensive linemen, I think that transition, especially the level and the quality of play that he was going up against too, that's a big jump. I mean, UConn, listen, it's a D1 program, but what he was facing and then what he had to face as he got into the NFL level, I mean, that's a huge difference. It's not like he's playing in the SEC and going to that. But yeah, I mean, listen, he comes back, he's going to be challenged because this is his career, right, Rob? I mean, his career's on the line. If he doesn't turn around this year, he's going to find himself out of the league real quick. And so I think when you put that type of pressure on someone that young of an age, we'll see what kind of he's made of and if he can turn around and get himself into better shape and then just make a new impression on a new offensive line coach and a new coordinator.
Absolutely. He needs to rocket up his arse. But, this is maybe the coaching staff that he needs, to come and get the best out of him now. And maybe they can turn over a new leaf and say, look, forget last year. That's gone. Now is your time. And if he could come in and even be average at right guard, because they didn't have average at any point last season, then that's an improvement. And if you can get a really good center, and if you can get a guard, and there's a whole bunch of things you could do. I'm just interested to see what the Chiefs are going to do with Joe Tooney. And are they going to want to keep Trey Smith, who's a lot younger, and switch one salary from one lineman to another? Would that make Joe Tooney available via trade? And I'm kind of was wondering about this today, thinking of things in my head. How could you get him to Seattle? I just wondered. There are some free agents, cornerbacks out there. There are some good cornerbacks in the draft. Maybe you chuck and Reek Woolen. I don't know. Maybe you just swap. They need a cornerback. You need an offensive lineman. Woolen obviously has amazing potential. It's a young player versus a very old player who's 32. But if you do not think you're going to end up paying Reek Woolen, and I'd be very, very, very cautious of doing that because he's not shown a level of maturity so far.
Yeah, there's the risk there for sure.
But if I was to say to most Seahawks fans now, you've got to go and find a cornerback in free agency, and you've got to trust Mike McDonald to go and find a cornerback somewhere. But you get Joe Tooney and you get Drew Dorman to play your offensive line next year. I think most people would go for it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's different ways that people look at like building an NFL team or any football team, but you and I see it the same. I just inside out. And I think you can find those. It's not to say like guys like Woolen and defensive backs and corners and all that aren't valuable. Of course they are. We watched it up close and personal, but I just you gotta commit. And that was my biggest takeaway from the Super Bowl. You have got to commit to building on the defensive line and the offensive line. That's why the Eagles won. I mean, that's just why they were able to dominate that football game, especially from a defensive standpoint. I mean, we're talking offense here, but when you have that type of pressure on a quarterback and you don't blitz one single time and you just have four guys getting after you, I mean, it's an absolute game changer. And then you watch them, what they did offensively. I know Barkley didn't have the greatest game in the world, but you saw the time that Jalen Hurts had to throw. It was, I mean, The only time he ever really got in any pressure was just because of him putting pressure on himself of holding the ball on too long or walking into a sack. But he had time to throw, and
were encouraged though. I was encouraged watching that. It encouraged me watching the Eagles do to the Chiefs because I don't think the Seahawks are going to. Because I don't think the Seahawks are going to find Patrick Mahomes too. I don't think anybody else is.
Oh, I see.
Like Patrick Mahomes is elite. He's one of a kind. You're not going to find a player like that. And if he wins it every year, the idea of having to find someone of that quality to challenge him is scary. But when I look at the Eagles' defense, they don't have Myles Garrett or Nick Bosa off the edge. They have edge rushers who are very similar, I think, to Boya Mafe and Derek Hall. You know, the Nolan Smiths, the Josh Sweats are not scary defensive ends. They have some good interior defensive linemen. You know, obviously Jalen Carter's had a big impact there, but the Seahawks have Leonard Williams.
Yeah.
You know, we hope that Byron Murphy's going to become a very good player. I would like to see Jaron Reed come back. So I think there's some similarities there. You know, Zach Bowlen's had a great season, but Ernest Jones showed some promising things, and maybe he will come back. Cooper DeJean's a very good player, but so is Devin Witherspoon and Julian Love. So I actually looked at that Eagles defense and thought, I don't think the Seahawks are a million miles away there. And then you look on the offense, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, you know, same draft, same school, best friends. They're similar. Devonta Smith, Jackson Smith and Jigba is a major difference there. Obviously, Saquon Barkley's in a class of his own. Yeah. But Ken Walker's still a very talented back and could perhaps do some of the similar things, maybe a Paul Roman's version of Saquon Barkley. I don't think Geno Smith is a million miles behind Jalen Hurts. And I think there are some quarterbacks in this draft who have got a similar backstory, if you want to say, to Jalen Hurts, who could be developed over time. The one striking difference between the Eagles and the Seahawks is the offensive line. And if you can get that offensive line fixed, then I don't think the Seahawks are a mile away from the Eagles. The Eagles lost to the Seahawks last season. They were awful in the second half of the year. The coach was going to get fired. Everyone was going to get fired.
It's going to get fired this year.
They had one really good offseason and turned it all around. So it encouraged me. I don't think the Seahawks are miles and miles and miles behind the Eagles. The one thing is they're miles behind on the offensive line. So fix that, and we can have a conversation about maybe the Seahawks.
What store do I go to fix that? Is there an offensive line store?
Yeah, I wish you could just order a great O-line on Amazon. That would be great.
How do you think this offense, when you look at what Kubiak, when we study maybe what he did at New Orleans and what he's done in the past at Minnesota, how does this take advantage of Geno Smith's best qualities, you think?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does that, because this will annoy a lot of people, but I kind of have the feeling that even if you improve the situation around Geno Smith, I still think Geno has got it in him to have the occasional, what I would call a brain fart. Sure. You know, the turnovers have been there throughout his career. And I think people sometimes think if you take the protection worries off him and put it on the center's shoulders, which is an aspect of this scheme, or if you can just be a bit more connected with play action, that he's suddenly going to turn into Joe Burrow. And I'm not of that opinion. So what I do think they'll be able to do is obviously that, you know, if they can produce a running game, it takes a bit of pressure off. If they get play action working, Geno up until last season was very good at play action. And he obviously has the physical tools to stretch the field. And we saw Klint Kubiak do that masterfully at times last year with two different receivers. So if I was DK, I'd go and get Marcus Valdes-Scantling, you know, just because of what he did with the Saints at the end of last season. It kind of revived his career. Bring him in as the third receiver once Tyler Lockett is gone. Stretch the field, attack, run the ball. That is something that I think a lot of quarterbacks would have success in. And Geno Smith has got the arm and the play action qualities to be good in that. So he's got everything there to have the best year of his career if they get the O-line fixed. Yeah,
that's what, you know, when I look at this offense and being described and knowing what they're going to run, the one thing I do get excited when it comes to Geno is I don't think they took advantage enough of play action with him. Yeah, because of his arm strength and how well he can push the ball downfield. I mean, I love play action. I mean, even if you don't run the ball, I love play action. I just love it. I love play action in a screen game. Give it to me all day long. All right, put it in a big bowl and I'll eat it all up. And so I think he's got a chance to have a really bounce back year. I mean, I know he put up numbers that were better than in his entire career of this past season, but you know, the glaring thing was the red zone. Part of the reason the numbers were up because they were just throwing the ball all over the place. But I think he's got a chance of having an even more efficient explosive type season this year with him. But you're right. I mean, the red zone is a problem for him. He's got a chance to, where he plays really, really good, and then he'll revert back to New York Geno.
That's always been around the corner for him, I'm afraid. And he, even in his best final year at West Virginia, it was great 6 games, average 4, bad 3 games. That's the way it's been with him. So I don't think he's going to suddenly become an amazing, flawless, great player at the age of 35. But he's going to be back. The Seahawks have made that very clear with their messaging in this week that he is going to be back. I imagine that they're saying what they're saying because they feel very confident that a compromise agreement is forthcoming. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if before the combine, Puck, we hear of a contract extension, which gives him a bit more money this year, but lowers his cap hit. Seahawks retain that flexibility for next year to move on if needs be. And as I told you last week, I really, really think they are going to draft a quarterback this year, and that quarterback is going to be developed and potentially would take over 2026 or 2027.
You wrote about this yesterday, just along those lines of Geno. Why you think what the Seahawks are saying publicly about Geno in the media? Why do you think? Because this approach last year, where it was like praise, Drew Lock is much. It was so odd last year about how much they praised Drew Lock. It was nauseating how much they praised the guy. What do you think the strategy is this year? Why have they gone out of their way to talk Geno Smith, up so much? You got Mike McDonald doing the interview with our buddy Aaron Levine at Q13. You got the situation yesterday. I mean, what did McDonald tell Aaron Levine? What was I wrote it down. I got to remember. I got to find it where I wrote it down. Where he says he can't understand why people don't think he's going to be the Seahawks quarterback. He's like dumbfounded. I don't even understand what you people are thinking. Kubiak saying yesterday, hey, part of the reason I took the job is because of Geno Smith. Why do you think they got the gas pedal so far down on their praise for Geno publicly?
I mean, I know what my counter question would have been to Mike McDonald on that. Well, the reason people think that, Mike, is because when you were asked about it at the end of the season, you were like, I guess he'll be back.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly right. You're the one, the reason that people are wondering if he's going to be on the team.
And then Geno Smith, when asked, he's like, whether I'm here or it's somebody else or something, paraphrasing a little bit, he said something like that. So that's why people are talking about it. I think the reason they're doing this, and it's the same reason they did it with Drew Lock last year. I think they thought, let's butter Drew Lock up a bit, and he might feel like he'll come back and he will have a legit chance to compete. And I don't think Drew Lock was sold on that and thought, I'm going to go to the Giants. I've got a better chance to start there. And I think what they're doing now is, they think being non-committal and looking like they're not that bothered about Geno is a hindrance in negotiations. And what they probably think is saying, we believe in the guy, this is the guy, is going to have a much more positive impact. That they're then going to go into negotiations and say, look, we believe in you, we want you here. There isn't a bunch of offers elsewhere. If we cut you, you're not necessarily going to get a contract like this. Come on, let's do this together. Let's finish the job, finish what we started, and let's go and do this. I also think they must know privately that this is heading in the right direction, because they wouldn't be speaking this positively if Geno was giving them the feeling that they might just have to cut him in a couple of weeks. That'd be preposterous, wouldn't it, to cut him now, having said all of this. So I think they're heading in that direction. But there is one other thing. I think once they've got this done, I think they will continue to promote Geno Smith. Everything that you see on social media will have a picture of Geno Smith on it.
Because they did it after the Super Bowl, right? Was that their first pick? Their first post after the Super Bowl was, hey, we're getting ready for next year, and it was a picture of him.
I think we'll have everything. I wouldn't be surprised if Geno suddenly starts doing a radio show every week or whatever. It's going to be a Geno fest. And I think the reason is because they want to set up a smokescreen. I think they want the league to think that Geno is, without question, the guy. Therefore, when the picks come around, teams are not fearful as much as they might be of the Seahawks drafting a quarterback, because I think they have got in their mind 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 quarterbacks that they like, and they too, I think they're going to take one.
I saw a video yesterday. Was it not Daniel Jeremiah? It was... Oh, God, he was on ESPN. He's not on ESPN anymore. Todd McShay.
Oh, yes.
I think he loves, is it Tyler Shuck at Texas Tech?
I saw those.
Or is it Louisville now?
He's always been everywhere, hasn't he?
God, he has. He's Oregon, Texas
Put a game
Tech.
for everybody.
Yeah, and he was like he couldn't shut up about him. He's like, this is the most talented. I think he said this is the most talented passer in the draft.
Well, that's quite a thing to say. He definitely didn't look like the most talented passer at the Senior Bowl, so I don't know about the whole draft. And at the Senior Bowl, there were one or two instances where he wasn't on the same page, and that's understandable. They don't play with each other all the time at the Senior Bowl, but he didn't stand out in the way that Todd was suggesting there. But I understand what the wider point it was making with this series of tweets, because the videos were showing somebody with arm talent who makes a lot of plays. And if you watch the highlights videos of Shook at Louisville, there's a lot of plays like that. And he is someone who I would put on the list. He's 26, so he's an older player, but he's not 30, so it's not that bad. I don't think that I would put him ahead of Will Howard and Ewers and Riley Leonard in terms of the pecking order. Maybe Jackson Dart's ahead of him as well. But I definitely think that he is one of them. I think those four and Shook are the players that I'd look at. And whether they take one at 50, whether they trade down a bit from 50 or trade up a bit from 82 or take one at 82, you get my point. Like if they trade down from 18 maybe and get an extra third, I think they're gonna take one of these guys. And it has to be day 2 because their next pick is at the end of the 4th round. It's a comp pick. So unless they acquire extra stock, if they're going to take a quarterback this year who is worth having, it's going to be round 2 or round 3. And I just think this is going to be the year. They don't have a bunch of holes to fill. They just have that offensive line, really. There's going to be value to have at other positions in free agency. There's a pretty interesting free agent list.
Yeah.
And they're going to get those. They've got 3 picks in the first 3 rounds. I just think one of them is going to be a QB. And they're going to have that guy potentially as the future of the franchise, but not guaranteed.
I want to believe you. I feel like Schneider's going to do it to us again. We're going to talk about it leading up to the draft. We're going to talk about it during the draft, and the draft's going to end, and they're going to go up there on Sunday afternoon or evening, and they're going to be like, well, it didn't fall to us. We just couldn't find a guy. Just didn't fall to us again this year. Can
I just say that? I'm almost at the point, Puck. I'm hesitant to say this because I'll look stupid if it doesn't come off.
Oh, who cares?
But, yeah, well, exactly. I don't really know what they're waiting for if they're not going to go this year. I know this sort of the narrative has been, and I've shared this narrative, is that it's not a great quarterback class. But, again, like Will Howard, I was looking at the stats. Do you realize that? So they have quarterback rating, don't they? And they have QBR. And sure. QBR is the ESPN one, which kind of dictates it's everything. It's not just the passes.
Yeah.
And Will Howard had like a 96 QBR in 4 playoff games. He was nearly perfect in the playoffs. Perfect. Riley Leonard's QBR was like 89. So you watch those games. They're the big games. They're the games that matter. And they're converting big third downs. They're elevating their team. They're getting them to the championship. Notre Dame were not supposed to be there. They were in parks of Riley Leonard. Will Howard did what C.J. Stroud, McCord couldn't do at Ohio State, won the national championship. These players they're big, they're athletic. That fits for John. They're mobile. You can imagine them in the scheme. I'd throw Ewers into that mix. I think that to some extent you could imagine Dart in this system. Shook. I'm kind of at the point, like, if you're not going to take one of these guys, like, what are you waiting for, man? You're the guy who traded with Drew Lock. You traded for Sam Howell. You traded for Charlie Whitehurst. You signed Matt Flynn. If any of these guys aren't good enough, no one's going to be good enough. So I think they're going to. I'm going to say on the 12th of Feb 2025 that when we get to the 1st of May or whenever it is the draft's finished, the Seahawks will have drafted a quarterback.
Okay.
Put it in ink.
Okay.
Guaranteed.
Okay. I hope. You know what? And I don't even care if the guy's good. I just want him to draft a guy just so we can just talk about it. I just draft a quarterback for the love of God. Just somebody and you know what? See, if it sticks against the wall, and if he's no good, then he's no good. Fine. But just draft and develop. God, and this is a problem for everyone in this league. When we talk about quarterbacks, it's like everyone's got to pick a guy in the top 5. If you don't pick him in the top 5 or top 10, it's not worth it. Draft and develop, draft and develop, draft and develop. And we used to do that. The league used to do that. And we just don't do it anymore. And it's this team doesn't do it. It's never done it. And I just think that you think back to those, and he came from the system that did it. Green Bay was perfect at it. And a guy that he highly respects, Mike Holmgren, that should have been in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, did it and drafted and developed and found multiple quarterbacks, including Think about it at one time. He's got Kurt Warner on his staff. He's got Mark Burnell on his staff. He's got Matt Hasselbeck there. Those guys are all starters. Drafted, developed, and then had them on the practice squad and had them, work at their craft. And then at one point, hey, is it time to, move them on and give them starting roles? And they did, and they all succeeded.
And you can always talk about the next quarterback draft, but the good players, like everyone says about Arch Manning, if Arch Manning's 1/10 as good as everybody thinks he is, he's going to be like first overall pick.
Right.
And these other guys are going to go early, and the Seahawks are never going to be in the top 5 barring like a catastrophe to be able to pick these players. And look, you just have to sort of balance this out. For this draft, finally, there is a middle class of quarterbacks in a draft. And people, I think that people are sleeping on these quarterbacks, by the way, because you'll chat to other people and they'll say, they're round 4, round 5, and okay, whatever. I think there is a middle class of quarterbacks that are capable of playing in the NFL. They're not the finished article, but as you just said, you're drafting them to develop. And if you're a team that is prepared to trade for Sam Howell, you've got to give these guys a chance as well.
I agree. We got a question for you from Citizen Salt. Max Brosmer, yeah. He's from Minnesota, right?
He is. It's something I've talked about a lot on the blog. Okay. He had a terrific season. And he is the one player who takes most of his snaps under center. So he's doing a lot of the pro stuff. He's play action. He elevated the team. They love him at Minnesota. Like the fans are devastated that he only had 1 year of eligibility left, that he couldn't stay there. And he made some really good throws. The sort of the word on him is that he's physically not that amazing. He's not big. He does have a reasonable arm. It's not a weak arm, but it's not a blistering cannon. But I thought he played very, very well last year. He didn't have a good Shrine game though. He looked a bit like a fish out of water in the Shrine Bowl game itself there, which I think has sort of knocked confidence in him. But the thing I always said during the season was he would be a good bet as a late round chance for a team who uses the Shanahan system. And that's what the Seahawks are using now. So if it gets to round 5, 6, and you haven't taken one, why the heck not? At the very least, I think he could be developed into a good backup. Yeah,
you think about this as we just kind of wrap it up. Think about like Brock Purdy for a second. This guy's the last pick in the draft. Last pick in the draft. And he's about to get paid, whether you think it's right or not, that he's going to get paid. He's about to get paid $50+ million. And it does not have to, the guy does not have to be taken in the first 10 picks. Just doesn't have to happen. You can find guys like any other position. Yes, the higher they're drafted, usually the better they're going to be, obviously. But you can just find guys. So maybe listen, everyone's, Rob, your point is well taken. Everyone's panning this draft for quarterbacks, and maybe there's a couple guys in here that work out and be quite well.
Very final thought is, what are you looking for? You're looking for winners. You're looking for guys who are good on third down. You're looking for guys with an arm. You're looking for guys that can move around, who can offer something as a running threat. They're not statues. And good character, good football character, good leaders. There's 4 or 5 of those guys in this draft. Go and take one. Okay.
All right, you can check all of Rob's work, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Watch his videos. He's breaking down draft picks. He had his first interview series, I believe. You talked to the Nebraska defensive lineman, Ty Robinson.
Ty Robinson, he's a dude.
That's up there on Rob Staton Football on YouTube. Please go there, subscribe to the channel. Go check out all of his NFL draft interviews. Again, all the work up at SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Staton. You're the very best. Appreciate it as always. And have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll talk to you next week.
See you next week.
There he is, Rob Staton. Again, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Go check it out on YouTube. It will be separate. It will be a part of the Daily Puck Drop, but also we separate Rob's weekly appearance there as well. When you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel as well. And, of course, on the podcast platforms, the Rob Staton Show podcast will be up on the Daily Puck Drop on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Big thanks to Superior Linen Service, family-owned and operated since 1926, serving and delivering the highest quality products to the Puget Sound area. Get your free quote today, suplinen.com, and give them a call, 253-383-2636. Rob Staton from SeahawksDraftBlog.com, and of course, you can always check everything up at pucksports.com.